Hello, Bay Ridge. Welcome to another edition of After Hours. First, I want to say I really appreciate the folks who take time to join in and listen to these little short vignettes each week that we put out there. I appreciate your heart to be a disciple and to learn and to follow after Christ. And so thanks for doing that. And today we're going to be talking about one of these aspects of discipleship. We looked at Jesus' original call to both Simon Peter and Andrew and then James and John, and we saw that Jesus said that he was calling them to follow him, which is about being a disciple. And one aspect of that was they were called to be fishers of men. That's what he was saying that he was doing. And so we had looked a lot about what discipleship entailed, and we're going to look at more next week, kind of the process. But I did want to take time to specifically talk about being a fisher of men. That is an important call in discipleship. Now, number one, just pay attention, and we notice the metaphor that they're called to be fishers of men, but that metaphor is clearly speaking about reaching out to others with the Gospels. They were fishermen, which was very common in Galilee, and obviously the idea, the metaphor here is as they would cast nets out, because they didn't use like a little rod and reel like we do. They would throw nets out and pull them in to gather in fish that they could then take to market. So we are called to be casting the net, as it were, to reach out to others and to try and see them brought in to the kingdom of God. And so just as Jesus called them, so he's saying, I'm going to be calling others through you. Jesus is the one who's going to call them, but they are to be out casting the net, as it were, to try and draw in the fish. And so now, of course, we could say, well, that applies to just Peter and Andrew and James and John. They were actual fishermen, but maybe it does not apply to me. I don't think evangelism is my gift or my call, but it actually applies to all of us. This passage is clearly meant by Mark to refer not just to what's happening in those four people's life, but he's teaching us about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, what it means to be a follower, or as I was using the term today, an apprentice of Jesus. And as Jesus himself made a priority of proclaiming the good news, telling others the good news, speaking about the reign of God and how God's kingdom has come, so we are called to do the same thing. This passage is teaching us how to be disciples, how to be a follower of Christ. And so we're going to see in the gospel ordinary people going off and telling others about Jesus. In fact, many times Jesus will even tell them, don't tell anybody yet, but they're so excited about what God has done in their life, they can't wait to get out and tell others about Jesus. And other times Jesus tells them. One man that Jesus has intervened in his life in Mark chapter 5, he's wanting to follow Jesus, but in Mark 5:19 we read Jesus telling him, go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. This is basically what evangelism is. Go to your family, go to your friends, go to your neighbors, go to your coworkers, and just tell them how much the Lord has done for you. You don't have to have a PhD in philosophy or theology or be able to answer every question. You just need to be able to say, this is what the Lord has done for me. He's shown mercy to me. And then we'll let Jesus use that and work with it. Now, this leads to the third point, which is that the New Testament clearly calls for all believers to share the gospel, not just the apostles, not just a select few. For example, in Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, the apostle Paul's writing to the Colossians, and he's been telling them, I want you to pray for me, and I want you to pray that God's going to open a door for the gospel, pray that I would be able to proclaim the gospel. And then the very next words out of his mouth are, be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you know how to answer everyone. Notice here what he's talking about is this being wise in the way you act towards outsiders is that specifically is you're going to make the most of every opportunity. God's at work. He's at work calling people in. As it were, he's saying, cast your net over here. And we need to be paying attention to that. We need to be wise about that. We need to make the most of every opportunity. That's actually the word kairos I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. This, not just general time, but we're paying attention. This seems to be an opportune moment. And in that moment, We have a conversation that's full of grace, but it is seasoned with salt. And we're ready to just answer as people are asking us questions about what the good news means. So this is a call to everybody. Paul said, hey, pray for me that I can preach the gospel, but I'm telling you, you have a responsibility as well. The same thing is done by Peter in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, where he says, in your heart set apart Christ as Lord, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. So there should be something in our lives as we're walking with Jesus, as we're being disciples, as we're following him. It may bring up questions to people, why we are involved in something or not involved in something. But in either event, we're ready just to be able to answer their questions. And again, most often, I want to encourage you, we sometimes think, well, what happens if they bring up this deep philosophical question about the problem of evil in the world or something that I can't answer? That's not what our call is. We don't have to answer every question. We don't have to be a philosopher. Most of your friends are not. They have the same thoughts and questions and concerns that you do, and you can just have conversation. We're not talking about going out and assaulting people. We're saying pray and look for opportunities. Make the most of every opportunity. Be ready so that when a door is open, you can explain to people about the hope of the gospel. And if we are really passionate about Jesus and we're following Jesus, there's going to be those opportunities. I want to encourage you, we don't have to get weird about it. People who worked around me knew that I was happily married. They knew that I had 4 kids. If you get to know me now, you're going to find out I have, at least at the time of this recording, 12 grandchildren. You're going to find that out because I'm excited about those things. You'll also find out that I like music, probably some of the groups that I like running, or I don't like running, but at least I do running. You find these things out because they're part of who I am. Well, if I'm a follower of Jesus, that's also going to come out in conversation, just in a natural way. I never felt pressured. I got to tell people that I'm married, nor did I feel weird when I did. It's a part of my life. It's who I am. And the same thing is true regarding me being a disciple of Jesus, a follower of Jesus. It's a privilege that we get to do this. And a lot of it can be simple. If you're praying for someone and you're looking for an open door, you can just simply invite them to come to church with you on Sunday. They may say no. That's all right. We're not the one who calls them. Only Jesus can call disciples, as we saw this morning. But we have the privilege of extending an invitation to them, reaching out to them. If they don't respond, we just keep praying. We just keep asking the Lord to work. But we're going to do our part to keep casting the net and pulling it in and seeing how God can work to establish the kingdom. So I hope it's encouraging to you. I know sometimes people feel daunted when they think about evangelism, but it's actually a great privilege. Of all the ways God could have worked, he did not need you and I to reach out to others with the good news. He's given us the privilege to be able to do that. And we should count it as a privilege, pray for and look for opportunities, because being a disciple of Jesus, a follower of Jesus, an apprentice of Jesus, means just as he was one out fishing for men, we're going to be out fishing for men and women and children to see how God's going to work. It's a great time for us to be serving the King as the kingdom is growing around the world. I hope this is encouraging to you, and I hope everybody watching this is going to get to come Friday night for the bonfire, and then for us to gather on Sunday as we continue in Mark's gospel, looking at what it means to be a follower, a disciple, an apprentice of Jesus. Have a great week. God bless.